Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin.
My name is Jackie Bell, and my brother slapped me across the face at my baby shower. There wasn't any fight first, no heated words leading up to it. Just his hand, swinging without warning, hitting me so hard that I tasted blood. I was opening a gift, a tiny pair of sneakers, something someone had bought for the baby. I don't even remember who. Devin was sitting beside me, one hand on my knee, his fingers warm, grounding me. The room smelled like cake and coffee, and I could hear people laughing quietly in the background. Then it all froze. Aunt Rachel gasped. Someone dropped a coffee mug. The air went thick. It was like time was suddenly crawling. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't even stumble. He didn't apologize. He just stood there, breathing heavy, staring at me like I owed him something. Like he had every right to do it. Devin was on his feet before I even had a chance to blink. His voice, calm but sharp, broke through the tension. "Get out. Now." Marcus didn't argue. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked out. And in that moment, the whole room knew what I had been trying to hide. The mask was off. The slap still stung when I walked into the kitchen, trying to shake it off. The air felt heavy now, thicker than it had been before. I wanted to act like nothing had happened, pretend everything was fine. But the truth was, the morning had already felt off before the slap. I'd gotten dressed alone, even though people had offered to help. I wasn't sure why, but it felt better that way. It wasn't just that I wasn't ready for the day, but that I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Maybe I should have listened to my gut. But, like always, I ignored it. Marcus was supposed to bring the cake and help set up. But by the time he showed up, the balloons were up, the snacks were laid out, and the chairs were scattered around the backyard. It didn't matter now. Still, I couldn't ignore the fact that he was 2 hours late. When he did show, I could smell the vodka before he even walked through the door. His shirt was untucked and his eyes were glassy. He slapped his hand on my shoulder like we were friends, not family, and laughed too loud at everything I said. Fake friendly, like he always was when he had something to prove. He wasn't here for me. He was here to make the day about himself. I brushed it off. I always did. I knew what it meant when Marcus acted like this, and I couldn't bring myself to make a scene. Not today. I just wanted to get through it. But Devin saw it. He always saw it. He didn't need to say anything, but I could feel his eyes on Marcus. He wasn't just looking. He was watching, like a hawk circling the tension in the room. He could tell something was off. He always could. I caught his gaze and felt a quiet calm in the storm that Marcus was creating. Devin was trying to make small talk, keep the mood light, but his hand on my knee tightened just a little. He was steady, strong. I clung to that steadiness because I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold things together. My Aunt Rachel hovered near the kitchen door, shifting from foot to foot. She was one of the only ones who seemed to notice the way Marcus was acting, but she didn't say anything either. No one did. It wasn't that I was afraid of Marcus, not exactly. It was just that with him, there were always cracks under the surface, tiny things that slipped through. Things that made everyone else uncomfortable, but never quite enough to say anything about. And with him, I was used to pretending everything was okay, pretending that maybe the next time would be different. But today, I couldn't pretend anymore, not after the slap. I remember when Marcus and I were told we were a team. Everyone said it over and over, like it was some kind of mantra. Our parents, coaches, teachers, they all thought we were perfect together. We were close in age, both athletes, both ambitious. The idea was that we'd be there for each other, always. I guess we tried to be. But Marcus needed to be the center of everything. Even then, he had this way of making everything about him. He wasn't just the star of the game, he was the hero of every story, even when it was obvious he wasn't. He could spin a tale about how he won a race when all he really did was finish third, and the way he told it, you'd think he was crossing a finish line in the Olympics. And our dad, he was hooked. Everything Marcus did was golden. Our dad praised him constantly, and I felt like I had to earn every word that came from his mouth. A nod of approval from him felt like climbing a mountain, like I had to fight for something that should have been mine by default. And maybe it was that fight that pushed me harder. Maybe that's why I got into business school, and he didn't. But it didn't feel like a win. It felt like a crack starting to show. Marcus didn't take it well. At first he was quiet about it, just shooting me these sideways glances that I pretended not to notice. But over time, the cracks deepened. He'd push me, literally sometimes. It wasn't hard enough to get him into trouble, just enough to let me know where I stood. He'd always throw some half laugh, like it wasn't a big deal, but it was. I felt it, deep down. And then the words came. Little insults at first, soft jabs, stuff that I could almost ignore if I really tried. But the more I rose, the more he tore down. You think you're better than us now. He'd say, like it was a crime to want more, to want better. I'd tell myself it wasn't worth responding, that I should just keep moving forward. But every insult, every word left its mark. The moment I got that acceptance letter to business school, something in Marcus snapped. I saw it on his face. Something dark, like he'd just realized I wasn't going to be the sidekick anymore. I wasn't going to follow him. He had always been the one with the spotlight. But now, for the first time, it was my turn. I remember the day I told him. I tried to make it sound casual, like it didn't matter, like it wasn't a big deal. But he didn't hear me. He wasn't listening to what I said. He was listening to what it meant. I could feel his anger before he said anything. You really think you're special now, huh? He shot back. You think you're better than me just because you got into some fancy school? His voice was tight, like he was trying to keep it together, but the words came out jagged, like he couldn't hold the pieces of himself together anymore. I didn't respond. I couldn't, because at that moment, I realized it wasn't about me anymore. It was about him, and no matter what I did, it would never be enough. He would always see me as someone who was in his way, and that was the turning point. I couldn't go back after that. The space between us grew wider, and every step I took, I could feel him pulling farther away, getting angrier. There was no going back to the team we were supposed to be, no rewinding to the days when it felt like we had each other's backs. That version of us was gone, and what was left was just him, the brother who couldn't stand the thought of me doing better. I met Devin at a volunteer event. It was a charity drive, handing out food to families in need. I wasn't expecting anything to come out of it. I wasn't looking for someone to notice me or for anything to click. But when I saw Devin across the room, I noticed something different. He was quiet, observant. He wasn't trying to stand out like everyone else. He didn't have to. He just moved through the crowd, doing what needed to be done, no drama, no fuss. We didn't talk at first. It wasn't one of those instant connections where you know you're supposed to be friends. It was slow, one conversation at a time, a shared lunch here, a quiet chat there. And somewhere along the way, we started talking more. Long talks about everything and nothing. He asked about my life, but it never felt like an interview. He listened, and I didn't realize how rare that was until I was sitting across from him one night, realizing that I was actually enjoying the quiet between us. I'd never had someone like that before. Most people in my life, especially the men, were always competing for attention. Marcus, my dad, even some of the guys I knew from school, everyone was always trying to be louder, stronger, more dominant. Devin didn't do any of that. He wasn't trying to impress me, wasn't trying to prove anything. He just was, and that was new. When Marcus met him, though, it wasn't the same. He took one look at Devin, raised his eyebrows, and sneered. "That guy's soft," he said, loud enough for me to hear. It was like a gut punch, but it wasn't surprising. Marcus always saw strength in the loudest voices, the biggest gestures, the ones that grabbed attention. He wouldn't understand Devin. He'd never see him for what he was. I knew exactly what Marcus meant by soft. It wasn't about being kind or patient or thoughtful. It was about being weak in his eyes. Devin didn't play the game Marcus had always played. He didn't react to things the way my brother expected, didn't bite when provoked. He didn't try to one-up anyone. But the more I was around Devin, the more I started to see the difference between what I thought was strength and what it actually was. Real strength wasn't about being the loudest in the room. It wasn't about throwing punches or belittling people to make yourself feel better. It was quiet, steady. It was in the way Devin listened when I spoke, in the way he stood firm without having to make a show of it. He didn't have to try to prove anything, and maybe that was the first crack in my understanding of what it meant to be a man. Growing up with Marcus, I had always equated strength with power, control, dominance. But Devin, with his calm, unwavering presence, made me realize there was more to it than just loud noise. There was strength in patience, in kindness, in being grounded enough not to let the world push you around. I didn't know it yet, but I was starting to fall for him. It wasn't just about the way he made me feel safe or understood. It was about the way he was reshaping what I thought I knew, and I needed that more than I'd ever realized. Marcus had been hovering around the edges of the party all afternoon, lurking like a storm cloud that wouldn't quite burst. He made a few sarcastic comments when I opened gifts, The ones he thought were stupid, the ones he thought were too much. Each time, he laughed too loud, trying to get attention. I pretended not to notice, but I could feel his eyes on me, waiting for me to react. Devin was still beside me, and he didn't say anything, but I could tell he was getting frustrated just like I was. Every time Marcus opened his mouth, there was a tension in his jaw, a tightness in his shoulders that I knew was building. He wasn't saying anything, but I knew he was getting fed up with the way Marcus was acting. Then someone made a joke about how Devin was going to be the best dad. It was meant to be light, casual, a little funny, but for some reason it hit Marcus like a switch had been flipped. I saw his eyes narrow before he even moved. Without a word, he walked over, cutting through the circle of people gathered around. His movements were sharp, deliberate. It was like he wasn't going to let anyone forget who was in charge. He stood in front of me, blocking my view of the party, blocking everything. And then he slapped me across the face. I didn't even have time to process it. The sting exploded across my skin, my cheek burning, and I swear I tasted blood. The whole room went dead silent. No one moved. Some of them looked away, like they didn't want to witness what was happening. But no one said a word, not a single person. It was like they were all too scared, too shocked to speak. I sat there, my hand pressed to my cheek, trying to stop my vision from swimming. I thought I might pass out, but then Devin stood up. He didn't hesitate. His voice was low and even, but it had a sharpness that cut through the silence. "Get out before I make you." There was a beat of hesitation, a flicker of something in Marcus's eyes. Maybe it was surprise, maybe it was pride, I don't know. But he didn't argue. He didn't make a scene. He just turned, walked out of the house like it was any other day, like he hadn't just shattered the air around us, and the second he was gone, the room fell apart. The tension that had been holding everything together snapped, and people started moving again, as if nothing had happened. Some of them were apologizing, trying to act like everything was fine, while others didn't say a word. I sat there, still numb. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. All I knew was that nothing was the same anymore. Marcus had shown me who he really was, and that slap had made it clear that I couldn't pretend anymore. Not to myself, not to anyone. The party fell apart after Marcus left. People started trickling out, their goodbyes feeling rushed, awkward, like they couldn't leave fast enough. Some of them apologized, half-hearted, like they didn't know what to say, but knew they had to say something. My cousin Sarah texted me later. "I'm so sorry. I never liked the way he talked to you." I almost laughed, but I didn't. It wasn't the time for that. Others just pretended nothing happened. They went on like the whole thing had been a bad dream. No one checked in, not even my uncle, who used to call me his second daughter. He'd been like a father to me once. I didn't even get a message from him. I could feel Devin's tension as he moved around the house, cleaning up what was left of the mess. He didn't say much, didn't try to comfort me, but I could tell it shook him too. He stayed calm through all of it, always steady. But I saw the way his eyes moved, the tightness in his jaw. He was just trying to hold it together for me, I think. I didn't cry. I couldn't, not then. It wasn't because I wasn't hurt. I was. My face burned, and there was a rawness in my chest that wouldn't go away. But it wasn't the physical pain that kept me numb. It was the hollow feeling, the way everything had shifted, the way it all suddenly felt real. The lie had collapsed. For years, I'd pretended Marcus was just going through a phase, that whatever was slipping inside him could be fixed, could be explained away. I'd ignored his jabs, brushed off his behavior as if it didn't matter, as if the brother I grew up with was still there somewhere underneath all that rage. But now it was clear. I couldn't pretend anymore. The facade had cracked wide open. Devin stayed with me as people filed out. He didn't rush me, didn't say anything to fill the silence. He just sat beside me, his presence enough for the moment. We didn't talk about what happened. There wasn't anything to say, really. There was nothing left to explain. But I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on both of us. I didn't need to speak it out loud for him to understand what had shifted between us, between me and the whole family. I hadn't been able to see it before, but now it was impossible to miss. Marcus had been slipping for years. He'd been pushing at the edges of everything we had, breaking things down slowly until there was nothing left to hold it together. And I'd let him. I'd convinced myself it wasn't as bad as it looked, that he wasn't as dangerous as he was becoming. But that slap, that was the final straw. I didn't cry because I wasn't sure who I was mourning, Marcus or the sister I'd been pretending to be for so long. A week later, a letter showed up in the mailbox. There was no return address, just his handwriting. It was a sick joke, really. I didn't even have to open it to know what it would say, but I did anyway. It read, "Sorry you felt hurt. We both said things we didn't mean." I didn't say a word before he slapped me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to defend myself. There was nothing I said that could have led him to believe it was okay to hit me. But that's the kind of apology I got. A cheap, generic line that somehow made it all about me, as if I was the one who misunderstood what happened. It wasn't even an apology. It was a justification for his behavior, wrapped in a bow. I didn't show it to Devin. I didn't need to. There was nothing he could say that would make it any clearer. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to talk about it. I wasn't ready to let anyone in, not yet. Instead, I started therapy. Quietly, without telling anyone. Not even Devin at first. It wasn't like I was hiding it from him. I just didn't feel the need to explain why. There were too many pieces to pick apart, and I wasn't ready to face them all at once. I needed to go somewhere, sit across from someone who didn't know my story, and just talk without anyone interrupting or pretending like it would be okay. My therapist was patient, asking questions, letting me speak, but there was one question that hit me like a slap. "When did you stop feeling safe around him?" she asked. I didn't have a clear answer. I couldn't pinpoint the moment I stopped feeling safe. It wasn't like some big, sudden shift. It wasn't one day when I woke up and suddenly realized he was a monster. It was gradual, like rot under paint. It had been happening for years, small things, little jabs, the way he'd push my buttons just enough to keep me on edge, keep me unsure. I'd spent so long trying to ignore it, convincing myself that it wasn't that bad. That this time, maybe, he'd change. That maybe I was just being sensitive, overreacting. But now I knew. I could see it clearly. I hadn't been safe with Marcus for a long time. Not physically, not emotionally. And now that I could see it, I couldn't unsee it. It was like standing in a room full of mirrors, each one reflecting a version of myself I hadn't wanted to face. The sister who kept excusing his behavior. The daughter who kept hoping for her father's approval. The woman who kept pretending that everything would be fine if she just kept moving forward. But it wasn't fine. None of it was. I wrote Marcus a letter. I didn't send it, though. I didn't need to. I just needed to get it out. It was the first time in a long time I'd put my thoughts on paper, and it felt good to finally say everything that had been building up inside me. I told him he lost the right to rewrite what happened, that he didn't get to pretend like it wasn't as bad as it was. I told him that silence wasn't the same as strength, that he could stay quiet all he wanted, but it didn't make him any less wrong. He had always been wrong. I told him I wasn't going to keep pretending. Not for him, not for anyone. I didn't need his approval anymore. I didn't expect him to change. He never did, but I couldn't keep carrying his weight around with me. I deleted his number. Not that he'd ever call again, but just in case I didn't want to have that temptation. And then there was my aunt. She kept calling, sending texts asking me to make peace. "He's family," she'd say. "You can't just walk away from family." Like I didn't know that. Like I hadn't spent my entire life trying to hold on to some version of family that only existed in my head. I finally told her to stop. I didn't want to hear it anymore. Devin and I moved. A small city, quieter, slower. We found a house near a park, a little cottage that smelled like fresh paint and wood floors. The walls weren't decorated with memories of people who weren't mine anymore. There was just us. And that felt good. For the first time in a long time, I started helping at a local women's center. It wasn't a grand thing. I wasn't leading workshops or saving the world. I was just there, listening, offering whatever I could to women who were working through their own battles. Some of them had been through things far worse than I could imagine. But it was enough for me to just show up, to listen to their stories without judgment. Sometimes that felt like more than enough. The silence wasn't so loud here. In this new life, with Devin by my side and the comfort of helping others, the noise of my past started to fade piece by piece. There were still moments when I'd think about Marcus, when I'd wonder if he ever thought about me, about what happened. But then I'd remind myself that I didn't owe him anything anymore, and that felt like freedom. One day, a woman named Kim walked into the center. She was polished, smart, one of those high-level corporate types who always looked like she had her life together. She came in, hesitated a little, but after a few visits, she finally said his name. Marcus Bell. At first, I didn't react. It didn't even register, not until she kept talking. She said he wasn't physical with her, but he'd done something worse. He'd tanked her career, stolen credit. isolated her until no one would believe her. She was trying to rebuild, trying to find her footing again, and she had this quiet rage in her eyes that mirrored everything I'd felt when I was stuck in the middle of it all. I listened. I didn't flinch. I didn't say anything for a long time. But inside, I was a mix of disbelief and something else, something colder. She wasn't the first person I'd met who had been affected by Marcus, but hearing it like this, it made me realize just how far his reach had gone, how much damage he'd done. It hit me in the gut. It wasn't just me anymore. After a few more sessions, I handed her the file I'd kept. I hadn't even realized I'd been holding on to it, but there it was, the witness statements from the baby shower, the ones that everyone had signed after Marcus slapped me, the formal complaint Devin had filed with the company's ethics board. I didn't have to say a word. I just gave it to her, the weight of it heavy between us. Kim didn't hesitate. She filed charges, and one by one, others came forward too. They spoke up about what Marcus had done to them, to his coworkers, his underlings, the women he'd belittled or disregarded. And when everything hit the fan, Marcus lost his pending promotion. I couldn't say I felt satisfied. I didn't want that for him, but I also knew he had earned every bit of it. I didn't reach out to Kim. I didn't try to track what happened next. I didn't go to the hearings. I didn't need to. I'd given her what she needed. The rest was hers. I stayed silent, stayed steady. Because at the end of it all, I realized I didn't need to fight this battle for him anymore. The world was seeing him for who he really was, and I wasn't the one who had to keep telling the story. I wasn't the one who needed to prove he was a monster. That was out of my hands now. 2 years later, Devin and I stood in the same backyard where it had all fallen apart. No guests, no decorations. Just us, standing under the same sky that had once felt like it was closing in on me. I was 7 months pregnant again. The soft curve of my belly, a reminder of how far I'd come, how much had changed since that day. We exchanged new vows, but there was no officiant, no crowd, just us, and the words we spoke to each other, under the same sky, the same air that had held so many broken moments. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the fairy tale I'd once imagined, but it was real. It was ours. I wore a plain cotton dress, simple and light, because that's all I needed. Devin wore jeans and the same watch from that day, the one he hadn't taken off since we'd first met. There was something about it, about him, that made me feel steady, like I could finally breathe again. After the vows, we didn't have a big reception or a toast. We didn't need anything more than the quiet between us. We sat on the porch, the fading light of the day spilling over the trees, watching the sun dip behind them. The world felt different now, calmer, softer. I turned to him and said, "I'm not angry anymore." He didn't say anything at first. He just nodded like he already knew, like he had been waiting for me to get there. There wasn't any need for words. The next morning, there was a card in the mailbox. No return name, just my address. I didn't have to open it to know who it was from. I didn't want to know. I ripped it open, read the line that made my stomach twist. "You always knew how to wait." I didn't need to read it twice. I threw it in the fire before I could even think about it. I wasn't waiting anymore.